So I'm in the middle of a campaign as we speak.
Wow.
Excellent. So I wanted to start off asking everyone to speak about the particular challenge that remote learning is having on African-American children and other children of color. And I know the next larger number would be the Latinx community. But could you kind of speak about what you know about some of the challenges prior to COVID that made it a challenge, and now having to switch gears? What is this like and to speak about it for yourselves, but also for the parents that you're serving, the families, as well as the children and students themselves? And anybody can start who has an idea about that.
Well, I can start. I think one of the biggest challenges was actually trying to make sure that all students and families had access to technology. And then just understanding that process. For example, I had parents who didn't have emails. And so it's been really challenging just to get everyone online as a first step. And then having to train teachers on how to actually teach virtually, for hours. So most recently, our teachers are doing more time now. I think it's about 120 minimally minutes a day. But when we first shut down, there was a major communication problem with teachers and families. We just were not really prepared. And so we've had to spend a lot of time just focusing on communication. So like for me, I have a really small school. All of my families have my cell number because I just have to overserve them.
Right.
And so they have to have access to me all the time. That's not the situation with all principals, but for my community and my families, I need to be connected. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Before retiring, we were in that temporary, what we had believed to be a temporary school closure, and transitioned very quickly to distance learning, March through the end of the school year, and now gearing up again at the start of this school year. So I have also experienced the similar breakdowns, gaps, and those are real, and they became magnified as a result of the coronavirus and distance learning. What was not there, again, magnified. So families who don't have internet access in their homes, emails, they don't have internet, right? Schools that are not one-to-one in terms of devices for students to even have to take home. So there was lack of resources. And then, as Carmen has said, the staff really not prepared in terms of shoulder online instruction. So in the high school setting, you would do things, they use Google Classroom. And so some were able to just post information in terms of what the lesson is, but there is a difference between posting and instruction, facilitating learning. And so that has been a tremendous gap, because if I don't have the device, I don't have the know-how, or then the parents not having the know-how to even get online to support the learning. And I think depending on the grade level, it is more profound, right? So high schoolers are pretty adept to utilizing technology that way. The elementary school students we have found in my former district and currently here in Monrovia, not so much. So it's really, really difficult.
Okay.
Yeah, I think everything that Carmen and Tracy have said, I co-sign on. But I would start, because you mentioned what were some of the challenges prior to the pandemic. And I would say that actually, our students were dealing with that other pandemic, that one that has existed for a long, long time.
Correct.
Black racism, schools built on basically a white supremacist sort of structure. And therefore we understood that they were already vulnerable, already under-resourced, already experiencing challenges in our schools. And so then this new pandemic, as Tracy said, just magnified all of that, made us super aware of some of the challenges, but really brought it to the forefront for teachers who might not have been as aware as we would have hoped. And so basically what we're trying to do is address, two things at the same time with these twin pandemics, right? Still trying to address how it is that schools are really built to underserve Black children. But then you have this other pandemic, which has us trying to scramble to get resources, to get our kids connected. And it's interesting. I gotta say this. So LA Unified, there's two things that I think the district has done right. And I'm a critic of the district. I've been working for them for a long time, but they've done two things right. One is this sort of universal access, getting kids connected, getting devices in the hands of every kid, getting every kid connected, whether it's a hotspot or something that gets them online so that we could do this. Now, it begs the question, why wasn't that policy to begin with? Why did we need this pandemic to do that? If you know that connectivity, access to internet is essential, right? In terms of learning in the year 2020, then it shouldn't have taken this particular pandemic to do that. But we also understand why, right? Some of the things I just mentioned. So one of the things I am really all about right now is I've always thought about school in an instructional context. And now I'm realizing why policy is so important. I've been resisting policy for a long time. Like, no, I'm instruction. Right. You guys are policy guys, right? I'm instruction. Now I see why policy is important, because where there is a will, when the district, when a large institution like the district, when these big super districts gets it in their head that, policy is going to be, we're going to get every kid connected. Look how quick they move. They just like that. And the question is, why weren't you doing that if in fact we understand this other pandemic has existed for years and years around underserving and undereducating Black children? Shouldn't that have been enough to engage in the same sort of, effort or initiative to do right by Black children? And so I say that we have to ask that question. And we also can't get back to physical school and then think that somehow we're going to go back to the way it was. Correct. Basically that universal access it's out the can now, right? It's gonna make this happen now. And so it's one of the things I'll be working for. Yeah.
There's an interesting kind of concept out there, and that is so much of African-American access to just about anything is based on proximity to white people. That we basically get all the amenities, any of the benefits, even stores, by virtue of being in proximity to white people. And as it relates to this pandemic, in order to make it available for white children, who it's designed for, this is not a situation where it's physical proximity. So they were unable to utilize that as a means of separating out the haves from the have-nots, right? Here it would be really hard to kind of do that. You were not going to give it to you, but we're going to give it to these kids. Well, since it's all a distance kind of process, everybody gets it, right? But we also find out as a result of that in school districts across the United States, the digital divide. We're realizing, parents who are all ready to go, they say, what's the problem? Well, oh no, these folks, this entire community, they didn't even have the cables in the ground. You understand me? Right. There was nothing was there, right? And so now you have the other side going, wait a minute, nothing was there, right? Because they're literally not even aware of that. They're like ready to go. And then they're hearing all this, which is in a way exposing everybody, opening the door up so folks can really get a sense of how the other side is living. I'm curious about how parents are doing.
Let me ask, this is what I was gonna, just before we move into that, I was just gonna say that I run a nonprofit organization called the Black Parent Initiative that really supports families and enabling families to help their children thrive. Initially, it was really around teaching Black parents how to be better advocates for their children's education, early education moving in. So it's like not just learning how to be an advocate for how they eat, but how do you advocate for them inside of these systems, right? The thing that's happening now on top of these double pandemics that you guys are talking about is also we get back to content. We know that the content and the material that the children are reading and using is not engaging for them in general. Now they have to try to stay engaged with material that does not relate to them online if they are going to get access. And then what you start to see is more disengagement because the kids turn off all their screens. So you have teachers who are now speaking to all blacked out. Nobody, the kids are laying in their bed, listening, half listening, but they want to make sure their names are on there. So the level of engagement, and I have teenagers, so I'm looking at how they're engaging with this. And then the school day is squished down, right? Because no one can expect them to be that many hours on a screen. So they're done by noon, pretty much, my kids, right? So you not only do you have a smaller amount of time to engage with material that doesn't relate to you. So now the anchoring is even worse because I don't want to learn this anyway. And now I'm laying in my bed and I don't have to look at you. So the level of disengagement for our kids, especially when you already don't have a teacher who looks like you. My daughter said, I don't want to see white faces every day. So she just cuts off the camera. So again, it's one of those things where I feel like on top of everything else that we're dealing with, all of the things that we were trying to address before when it comes to content and curriculum and representation has been exacerbated within the smaller amount of time with now you have to engage online. And so our parents are having a really hard time getting their students to engage in this process. The teachers are frustrated. They don't seem like they want to be there. They're not excited to present the material. So it's really challenging for them to be advocates in this system also. Great point.
But here it's interesting that engagement piece is super important. And right now, LAUSD is really thinking of engagement in a way that teachers typically don't think of it. They're thinking of it quantitatively, right? They have these metrics to try to quantify engagement and based on connectivity, things that are important though. I mean, obviously, if everybody's engaged in distance learning, as Dr. DeGroot said, then kids have to be connected. But engagement is a qualitative issue in most classrooms, right? I think, and that's how you're speaking of it. Not just that kids are connected, but what's actually happening. Luckily for me, I lead this work around truly changing instruction so that it is more responsive to who our kids are and therefore more engaging, right? And so reading materials and resources and signature literature that do feature, characters and themes and ideas that reflect who our kids are. And so how do we though make that effective within the virtual space is a entirely different pedagogical sort of quandary, right? We got to think about how do we really make this work with kids looking at a screen, teacher behind the screen, trying to interact with children. And so that's something that we're working on, right? We haven't mastered it. And if anybody tells you they've mastered it, they're lying because the bottom line is, it's too new, right? But that's something we're working on. And so I'm glad you mentioned that.
I think it's critical, as you've said, Dr. Jackson, that we have this crisis on two levels, but it is an opportunity within this crisis to reimagine, right? To re-image how we do education for all students, right? And particularly now, interesting enough, suddenly everybody is talking about social emotional learning. Right? So all of a sudden, because we have to do distance learning and because this, that, and the other, now we got to worry about the social emotional wellness. Well, why weren't we worried about that before?
Right.
So it's real interesting that when the greater society has things it has to contend with by proximity, we get the benefit because now all is going to mean all, because we're all at home. Right? We all are concerned about the lack of human connection. Now you're worried about those relationships, are you? Right? It wasn't something we truly looked at seriously. We knew we needed to, but now you must, because there are different experiences within those households. Unfortunately, incidents of violence in the home has started to go up. There are other implications of trying to learn from home, besides connectivity, however you say that word, and content. There are other social emotional parameters that are impacting the entire situation. So it's one of those things that I say all of that it's a wonderful opportunity, because now everybody has to reimagine what we're doing with this thing called education, right? So it's a wonderful opportunity. It's difficult, it's a struggle, but it's a wonderful opportunity.
You know, we've been working around the fact that everybody's home, right? So you might have had, you know, an alcoholic parent who goes to the bar, but now they're at home with you, you know, or you might have all those, or there's not enough space to even have a space. Even if you have 3 computers for 3 kids, you're supposed to support them getting online at the same time. What is your level of connectivity? What kind of, why? I know in my house, everything's slow if there's too many people online at one time. And do we have enough distance between each other to even be able to hear ourselves think, right? Everybody doesn't have a set of earphones to keep them the sound out, right? So even if you got a computer, you didn't get a set of AirPods. So you're all, you know, even if and you don't have a lot of space. So if you're all in the kitchen, you think about the kind of chaos that's creating. And so what you're seeing is a lot of not learning. I'm turning it around.
The other thing too is it's those parents who have to go to work. So we need to, we really need to really think about that population, because it's not just having the device, especially for young children like the kindergartners and the first grade students whose parents can't be there. I recently had a parent who just returned everything to the school because she's like, I can't do this. I have to work. I can't get my child connected at the times, you know, the teacher has designated. So that's a huge reality. You know, people have to go to work, and now someone has to be at home with the children. So, you know, they're having a really tough time, I feel like, just figuring that part out. You know, it's one thing not to have good Wi-Fi, but it's another thing you can't even be there. You know? So I mean, that's like that's real. You know, you got to go to work, you don't have anyone to watch your child. And so they're really trying to figure that piece out. And my heart just goes out to them. And I just feel like as educators, we have to be really empathetic. You know, I talk to parents all the time, and I'm trying to talk them down, you know, de-escalate them, because they're feeling like my child's going to be marked absent. I can't get connected. And so those are their realities too. So it's tough. It's tough.
I think too, one of the things that kind of stood out for me, because I work with organizations around the country. I'm working with organizations that work with other countries. And what I'm seeing as I'm speaking to folks, so I'm working, think about, I'm in an organization that's working with youth or children or families, and I'm speaking to people in different departments. And I remember speaking to a young woman who has like 4 children, elementary, middle, and high school. And she just said, she came on because we were basically, there was 2 questions I asked. How are you doing personally? And how are you doing professionally, given the pandemic and the racial stuff going on? So wide open. And she came on, she had this kind of, just a sadness in her face. And again, I'm just working now with the nursing staff, or I'm working with the communication staff. And so it's small groups of people in departments. And she just said, I'm numb. She just said, I'm numb. She goes, I don't know how to teach children. I don't know how to homeschool. I don't have those skills. I don't know how to do this. And so she was shutting down. And so my greater concern was, mom's not doing well. Mom's at home by herself. Mom has to work. So I am now, you know, the other switching hats and going, is everybody safe in there? Right. And you could tell, I said, you know, anger, frustration, even anxiety, you can put your hands on. Numb, you can't. Numb is a spiral down that can go way down. And so what I'm also recognizing is that, you know, like if I were to ask each of you right now, which I'm going to do, what is your favorite age? for children? If you're going to have a group
Oh,
of
to
kids,
teach them or?
no, just your favorite age.
Oh, three to about 5 or 6. Because they're discovering everything, right?
And they're happy.
They don't have the attitudes yet. They, they're little people. So three to about 6.
Okay. Okay.
Go ahead, Carmen.
Oh, I said 5. I said 5.
See,
Yeah.
right there. See, the little ones.
So,
Okay.
yeah, that's a really tough question, Joy. I mean, and the reason why is I'm an elementary educator. I've basically been elementary for much of my life. Taught 5th grade for a number of years. Funny, Tracy, that we were both 33 years and 10 years as teachers in the classroom, right? And so during those 10 years, I taught 5th grade for about 7 of those 10 years, and then went to 2nd grade and loved those 7-year-olds, right? It was just incredible because they were really smart. I had no idea how bright 7-year-olds are. And I didn't really have to, some people said dumb things down. No, that's not what you do at all. You just make it developmentally appropriate, but it's still rigorous. You still do all that stuff. But then I started a charter school and we went up to 8th grade and I fell in love with middle school students. And I know people hate them, right? But I fell in love with middle school, and it's just such a certain thing that they bring. I mean, and all their goofiness, right? And you're in that, being 12 years old, 13 years old is tough. I mean, it is, right?
God,
Yeah.
It's tough, but I really love them. So it's hard to say because I've had these different experiences, and I found something beautiful in each of the age groups that I've worked with. Never had the opportunity to work at high school, so I can't say anything about that.
But see, that was an unfair question because you didn't ask me as a teacher.
No,
As a teacher.
I'm asking you as a teacher.
Yeah, see, but he went to as a teacher. As a teacher, taught middle school, high school. I like teaching 9th grade and 12th grade because 9th grade, they came in, what 9th grade is about. But at least by 12th grade, they got their minds back, right? So teaching, that's a different question to what age group could you hang out with, right?
Yeah, it sure is.
But the reason I asked that question, I actually had a reason for it. And what I've discovered, because in my family, right?
Right.
I know my sister, she's great, like up to 10. After 10, no.
She loses it.
Now,
Yeah.
I want them from 10. Don't just give me, they got to be able to, yeah.
Let me tell you something. Let me just tell you something. You know how the grandmas that are like, I just have to hold my babies.
The babies.
That was not her, okay? She's like, and here you go.
Yes.
And I'd be like, so what is going on? We've been watching Lord of the Rings. What? The baby? Yeah, no. That's right. You don't get to keep the baby because you're not the right kind of grandma for this. We gotta find
Yes. Babies.
I gotta hold the baby. She wants them when they can have conversations.
Exactly.
And they love her now, especially. This is the perfect time.
But the reason why I'm saying that is what I've throughout my life, you begin to learn these things, right? It's like when my granddaughter was 4 and she said she wanted to have a birthday party, right? And then she goes, but I don't want any babies there. And I'm like,
but you're 4.
You're 4. What are you talking about? You want no babies? And you're a baby. But it's the whole idea that I think that when we can connect with children, like immediately as you all were talking, because I'm not, and I've taught elementary, middle, high school, and college. I taught everybody, right? But what I really realized was, it's like last night, but he and I think, weren't we on a Zoom? It's all Zooming together now, so I don't know.
Okay.
But what happens is it was my course, my online course. So now my online students are like, are you crazy? Okay. So, so my online course, first day, of the online course. But what happens is there's an energy that comes to my classes. And part of that energy is because of me. I'm high energy, but he is high energy. And we're teaching this class so authentically. There ain't no pressure. Ain't nobody trying to not be too black or whatever. You get to show up who you are. You're white. I don't care who you are. You get to show up.
Okay.
And so what I think happens with our children in terms of keeping their attention, I remember seeing, and this, you guys stay with me here, there was a teacher who learned handshakes with every single child.
Right.
So
Yes.
as the child came in, they were like, and each child, remember,
Had their own
it's
handshake.
their own thing, right? And
Right.
what I loved about that teacher, and I mean, and it was like a whole room full of kids. I don't know how the teacher remembered all of that, but it meant so much to the kids.
Mhm.
That greeting, that beginning, I know who you are, you got a special thing with me. Is that
Right.
making sense?
Yeah.
That
Yes.
we have to become more culturally present, and we've got to be more authentically present. I think specifically for African American children and other children of color, because they're so used to being invisible.
Right.
They're so used to being kind of this, not really a sense of who they are in that space. And I think that teachers, a part of that mental emotional learning and that whole idea of being prepared has to do with people being able to honor and identify their reality. Who I am, where I come from. And it's not hard to fold that into curriculum. It's not hard to take a few seconds on the tip top of it and talk about food or whatever else you need to do to bring people into a sense of their own space and their own authentic reality, because there's an authentic reality that's happening right here in our spaces. People are in my house right now. When I'm in, you ain't in my house, right? You are in my house. You know, folk might be walking by, lights may go out, somebody will hand me a cup. And there's a sense of trueness, realness with Dr. Joy, right? And so what Tracy is saying about this opportunity, it is an opportunity. And I'm saying that if we are Black parents, principals, teachers, custodians, whoever we are, I think we now have an opportunity to be our authentic selves. Does that make sense? Yeah. We have an opportunity to show children that you get to be you.
Yeah.
And that I see you as a person. You know what I mean? Instead of that very blank slate, everybody is sitting rows, and it's I don't even know, I remember Tracy was I'll never forget this. I went to one of Tracy's schools, one of the many schools that I visited. I'm in the school, and Tracy is literally, she didn't tell her staff. She just walked me through the school. So she walks into one classroom and she goes, she's sitting down. The teacher was sitting down in the corner. She goes, you don't get to just sit down and instruct, She goes, we're going to have to talk to her a little later about that. And then as we're walking across the campus, there's a woman who's lining up. She goes, these children don't need to line up. Why is she lining them up? They're not like 6, right? So she's looking at him going, we're going to have to explain to her this, you ain't in the Army.
Right.
And the children don't need to be lined up, and you don't have to be yelling at them like you're a drill sergeant, right? But she's doing all this. And of course, the teachers and the people are surprised because the principal is showing up. And at the same time, what I'm getting from her space is how she humanizes that campus. She humanizes it and says, yeah, they're acting, kind of off here, but they don't know. I got to bring them back to themselves. So this was not punitive so much as it was observing how we get into these habits of what we think, and we forget what it's like to be a child, to forget what it's like to be excited about learning.
I think that's why I gravitated so much so to restorative practices, capital R, little j, because it is the rehumanization of people in the building, right? So much so, and not to diss LA Unified or anyone else, but you have a lot of systems to try to regiment discipline and safety, and you've got the PBIS and all that. That's wonderful. But the restorative practices, for me, brought in the human element, right? And so the authentic self Anger is an authentic emotion, right? So now what do I do with that anger? That is, and so now, like you said, we're in the home. And so as the stress level of the home rises, there will be some authentic expressions of true, authentic emotions. So how are we going to not put that out or dismiss that, but cultivate that in terms of that space, which is a part of learning? For me, it is an integral part of learning. And so this opportunity to not escape our true selves, you have students, because you have some school systems that had uniform policies. Well, how are you going to enforce a uniform when I'm in my bed looking at the screen? Not going to happen. You have folks that are saying, well, no, you can't have the hoodies on, and you can't do this, and you can't slow down on that. The fact that they have signed on and they're present, you need to acknowledge that.
Yep.
And not institutionalize learning in terms of dehumanizing the process. Right. So I think we have to be very, very careful here that we don't reestablish all of the things that were problematic before this new reality. No. I don't know. I hope that made sense.
That makes total sense, Tracy. I think that whole idea of many teachers wanting to recreate the most dehumanizing aspects of the physical classroom and the virtual space is just ridiculous, right?
Correct.
I'm sure you guys have, I mean, it's been all in the news, the kid who was playing, he's at home, right? He's
with his toy gun.
Playing with the toy gun and got suspended for 5 days. I mean, check it out. Yes. And it's like, so y'all kicking black kids out of virtual.
And they said it was like a lime green gun. Like you knew it was a toy.
Yes.
You got kicked out of virtual school. They're
kicking us out of kids out of virtual
5
school.
days.
At least they can't send the police to your house. Well,
you're kicking black kids out of virtual school. It's like
you can't win.
Wow.
I have a question about restorative justice practices. My question is, because I do agree, it's a huge thing that we're trying to move towards, right? Because you get to, like, you have a problem, you can come back to community. But I think one of the opportunities that we have now too is to work with kids around. We talked a lot about the poverty of words, right? So one of the things that I discovered in my children's elementary school was that you'd see a blow up and the kid would be like, I don't like him, he's mean. And really when you get to the root of it, it's like that kid embarrassed you. You felt embarrassed.
There it is.
Humiliated. You felt, you weren't just mad because he's mean. You were hurt because he embarrassed you. And so really helping kids.
Emotional intelligence.
Right. Restorative justice helps you restore. Then you're like, oh, now we see what happened. We can actually restore our community, which is our classroom, and we can welcome you back to our community. We did the same thing. We were looking at chronic absenteeism, which you are still going to have in a virtual world. Chronic absenteeism. People are not going to show up. People aren't going to get them up, get them ready to be presentable on screen, all those things, right? But when we started talking about, well, why don't kids want to come back to school? And we talked to the parents, we found out, oh, because they go, oh, where have you been? They embarrass them when they get back to school. Now you got to catch up with all the work. I don't know how you're going to catch up, right? And when they took the practices and said, we're going to start saying, oh, we're so happy you're back. We missed you. Welcome, such and such. We're so glad to see you. We're going to make sure you get all caught up. We're so happy to have you back. It's a totally different approach to a problem, chronic absenteeism. Oh, they're always gone. To shifting that to being, restoring their faith in that this community is for them. That this is an opportunity you can rethink all those practices by how you start your virtual classroom, by how you bring everyone in, or anything. You can make it something. And that's what I think teachers forget. They're stressed. I give all credit to teachers. The expectations on them are huge with limited resources and even more limited time. I give all the respect to teachers. But if they forget the fact that they went into teaching because their desire was to educate children or youth or whoever, then the dehumanization is so easy because it becomes very hierarchical, white supremacist based hierarchies that you will do what I say, not I am excited to show you and to teach you and instruct you so that you can learn. And so this is an opportunity, I think, for us to, and I really do believe, this is my plan is, see, folks like you should get together. This is an opportunity. I'm telling you right now. My brother was saying this yesterday.
We really need to be doing our own schools. I'm
This is
just
my
saying,
point. This is my point.
we could do it. We
Yep.
on this
Right here.
We can do our own school. Come on.
No, but
We
just
got all the bases covered.
take history. Just take world history. Just take history, U.S. history, whatever you want to say. Just take that subject and make it more comprehensive and legit and not and no lies. The level of engagement that you would see in that subject would go crazy. Just take math and just reformulate how math is taught and why and how math connects to all. I'm telling you, I think we could take that show on the road. That one right there.
Listen.
I think we can always fire out that because that's what people want to do. People want to hear. Kids want to be educated about stuff that they care about.
Absolutely.
When you tell them crazy stories, I told a group of fourth graders one time. Okay, just so you know, I was in a group with my daughter. When I volunteer, I would never be in her group because I'm mom. I get a different group. And so the kids are supposed to be doing a social justice world project or something. So the kids were like, the problem we want to solve is water in Africa. I'm like, what do you water in Africa? Where? Where? We want people to be able to have drinking water in Africa. I said, well, a lot of Africans have drinking water. What are you talking about? First of all, you got to figure out what you're talking about. And then you should really look at to see what are the needs of that community. So they went and they said, oh, I remember Sudan. They're gonna go to Sudan. And I said, so why is there a water problem in Sudan? How do you know there's a water problem? Look at the hierarchy of needs, and so they said, well, what do you mean? I said, for instance, in my house, my dog is not the same level as my children. For me, my dog is the emergency food supply if it gets really bad. The kids are like, oh. And I was like, they were like, and a couple kids were like, that is true though. I'm like, right? I said, now our dog is really small, so I'd have to make like dog jerky. He wouldn't really be a good meal. And they were like, so we get home and my daughter goes, did you tell my friends that you were gonna eat our dog? I was like, no. So I go back to school the second day and I said, hey, listen guys, come here. 2 rules. 1, don't tell Naomi what we talk about. That's none of her business. This is our group. Second of all, the dog is safe for now, right? So kids were like, okay, so if I was in Sudan, what would I need? And so we started the project, but connecting around things that they could relate to, their home.
Real world application.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? And so the thing about it is that when you have people who are excited for children to learn, it takes a lot of stress out of and anxiety out of being like, sit down, Timmy, get Timmy to help you lead the class. Get Timmy to tell you some interesting facts tomorrow about whatever he's interested in. But those are the things that I feel like the social workers, right, can help the educators in terms of how to humanize that process. Because everybody's not like y'all. A lot of people just are, you know.
How much is this about control though? See, I can remember the thing that I realized about, and I have to admit that there are parts of I liked elementary school. Middle school was a wash. I could have just not gone. I could have just
skipped on over it.
Didn't do middle school. But I can remember dealing with teachers that looked like they hated me. Do you understand me? They just looked at me with disappointment every single time I entered the classroom. And I was never a bad student, but I can remember having to counter the fact that I just felt like my teacher didn't care anything about me, didn't respect me, didn't like me, didn't want to be there, looking at their watch, when is this over, kind of thing. And then when they were in there, they were like, their whole thing was control. You need to be sit up. Everything was like, I'm going, who wants that? And at the same time, I'm wondering how much and that's a very Eurocentric, control, regimented, linear, boxes that everybody got to fit in, right? And if you don't fit in that box and you're not a good student, you're not college material, you're not all of these things. And by all the things that my teacher said about me, I should never have gotten out of high school, ever. I shouldn't have been able to get out. Based on the way they perceived me. So when you said that your students are like turning off the screen because this is the one time I don't have to look at the white face all day, and that the face that looks back at me, disparagingly or whatever, how much of this is about control?
I think a great deal of it is. As a matter of fact, Dr. Joy, when you mentioned that whole idea of walking and lining up and And you said this isn't the Army and barking orders. I actually have always related it to the penitentiary. And the reason I say that is because I have my older brother was a lifer, right? He was incarcerated for 28 years. And I visited every basically penitentiary in California, because when you're in prison for 28 years, they move you around, right? Prisons change levels and you go to all of them. And one of the first things that I noticed, it's funny, at the same time I was starting a charter school. And I remember going and basically heard the bell, right? And then you see folks begin to move, or you can hear the noise based on the bell. So the first thing I said when we started our charter school, we're not gonna have any bells. And people were like, no bells? They couldn't imagine a school with no bells. I said, no, why? And they said, why? I said, because that's what they have in prison, and we're not walking in lines. This whole concept of walking just as a blob, keep everybody together so people can be safe. Let's stay together, but we don't need to be in two straight lines. We can move as a unit without being in two straight lines, right? And so I think it's super important to begin to recognize some of those ways of being and doing in school that actually really are about control and really about dehumanizing students in really, it's so apparent, right? You just get to see it. And so there are things you can do to undo that though in schools, and so many people just don't have that sense of, well, what would a school look like without bells? Well, I've done it and it looks fine. We synchronized our watches and we paid attention to the time, right? And at a certain time, there were transition times. Kids began to pay attention. They knew, right? First of all, every kid then learns how to tell time on an analog clock. First of all, if you don't have any bells, right? They have
right, because many of them can't tell time.
Right, and so, but there are a number of things that I think are all about control in our schools that we need to undo, right? And really kind of change our way of thinking around what schools should be about. Because if school is about liberation, then it can't be about control.
Can't be about control.
It just cannot be. Yeah.
I was in Carmen's school and I was in Tracy's school. And there were two things that stood out to me about them when they walked me through their schools. And it was the fact that, first of all, how many children were in those schools? I don't know how many were, but y'all knew all their names. I couldn't believe it. And then this is what was killing me. People would come in. There would even be people off the street came in Carmen's building, and I'm going, how do you know all these people?
You must.
On a first name basis.
Yes.
Asked about how the son's thing went, and I'm like, my God, but it was so, I felt so, why couldn't I have had a school like this where the principal actually knew me, not because I'd done something wrong, and then I walked through, this was the end of school now with Tracy, and we're walking out and we're walking through, it's after school. So, you got all the kids, they're leaving, and Tracy stops and goes, you don't go to school here. These were two children just on the swings. I'm going, how do you know? She goes, you don't go to this school. And they went, goes, and you probably don't belong right here now, do you? Right? But it just blew me away. We're walking by two children, the strangest children, and she knew they didn't belong in the school. Right? But it was like just that whole idea of personalizing the connections. Carmen knew the children. She knew their parents. She knew the issue that was going on there.
You have to.
Yeah, I think that that's a conscious decision, and that has to be intentional. And I think that we need to begin to define our work that way around relationships. Because if I have a positive and a good relationship with those kindergartners, when I zoom in every morning and I talk to them about what's going on with their families and other things, they're going to show up because they're just going to want to have the conversation. And so I have encouraged my teachers. One of my teachers said she didn't know about what was going on in the family and, the different things that children were experiencing. And I said, I need you to know all of that. I need you to know about the aunt, the uncle, the mother who's sick. I need you to know, because that's how we need to serve families. Like it's our life's work, and you have to care about them. which is one of the reasons why I just give them my number. I've had parents text me on the weekends. I mean, I'm just in it. They've texted me and said, I don't have a place to live, and I'm connecting them with a social worker, but I'm just here to help. And I think that, it's that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much
you care.
And once you show them how much you actually care about them, I just think it's a win. Even kids are going to show up if they know you care. They just want to talk to you today. It's the highlight of their day.
It is.
And you need to give them the opportunity to have that conversation instead of putting somebody else on the screen to like read the story. Like we have all these platforms now where teachers can do split screens and they can show this and they can show that. And I've told my teachers, for kindergarten and first grade, you need to do that read aloud. They need to see you. You need to ask those questions. Don't throw somebody up on the screen that they don't know. This is an opportunity for you to really engage them and really have a great relationship. So I just think that we need to think about it differently. And I know that there's so many expectations for teachers right now. We're trying to get through the day, trying to cover standards, but that needs to be what happens first and foremost, that relationship piece. Because if you do that part right now and you connect them, then they'll want to log on.
That's facilitating the ability to teach and honor learning, right? So you're facilitating the learning process. It's a little trickier the higher level you get, because you go from 20, 30, 35 kids in a classroom to a teacher could have 150 kids when they're in high school, right? So you multiply 35 times 5 periods in a day. It gets taxing. I think in this current reality, the teachers are the ones I think that are highly stressed, because this is not necessarily, if you will, something they signed up for, right? Change is inevitable, but change is very difficult. And the modality in which they are being called to deliver instruction, some are very much not prepared for this change, this degree of change. So you said, how are the children? How are the parents? But the teachers, that the connective tissue between school to home resides in the hands of the teachers. And I think there is a large need to focus and nurture and support them and their wellness, because they have their homes, many have their own children, but then now they're called to shoulder this for others. And I think in all of the equation, I'm not saying that the students are not having their struggles or the parents are not having theirs, but the teachers, I think, are probably the ones that are most shell-shocked by this current reality.
Yeah, and I just think as a school leader, it's just really important to get them to understand how important it is to just relax. Like I'm always telling my teachers, we're figuring this out as we go along. Right. You're not being judged. Don't think I'm zooming in to be critical. We're figuring it out, and I am another voice. I'm not doing it, but definitely we need to have a conversation about it. And so that's just what I'm saying to teachers. I think teachers are phenomenal, and we just need to relax a little bit. Let's just focus and just relax. Go ahead.
Carmen and Tracy, I was going to say thank you both because Carmen, that whole piece about the relationship piece, one of my earliest mentors, Dr. Subira Kifano, rest in peace, she's no longer with us. She's transitioned and she's amongst the ancestors, and I'm hoping I'm making her proud every day. But she told me, Anthony, you got to touch our students' hearts before you try to reach their minds, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
When you reach their minds, you got to touch their hearts. And I'll never forget that. And so, and then, Tracy, you're talking about really being, thinking about what our teachers are going through. We started this year. First of all, I told my principals, I said, first of all, I'm not going to front like I've done what you guys are about to try to do. I never had no school during the pandemic, right? And so, I was like, I've never done it before, so I'm not going to try to act like I have. We're doing. Let's try to be thought partners and think about how we can do this right so that we serve children and families well. That's number one. But I think the second thing that comes to mind with regards to engaging in this is the need to be, as you were saying, Tracy, gentle and tender, and at the same time, fierce and urgent, because we know our kids
Correct.
can be, I mean, there's this resource gulf that exists for our children, right? That we have to pay attention to. And so that became the theme around, school leader ways of being and doing this year was being gentle and tender, but also fierce and urgent, right, in the work. And so, and that's a really artful balance to really try to to get after, right? And sometimes I fail, but hopefully, and this is what I tell my principals that I work with, we might not always get there, but hopefully we learn how to balance those things to create the schools that we would want for our very own children.
Like y'all,
Absolutely.
all together,
Absolutely.
creating that delicate balance for money. I'm just saying, you guys can make it happen. You know the delicate balance. This is the thing. People who don't know the delicate balance, people who study us but aren't us and don't live in this skin and will create something that they think is more equitable and more balanced, and then they will sell it to school districts, and it will be authored by white men, Dr. such and such and such, who spent time in the ghetto. And now they have this new understanding of what Black kids need. I'm just saying, it's coming. It's coming. So I'm just saying, I think we need to get on that train early. I'll be contacting you all separately with my master plan once I've coached.
Your master plan.
Listen, let me tell you something. Mom, you're muted.
Myself, because I was making noise. There was a teacher, the teacher who everyone loved at Sabin. That what was her name? Miss Foster.
She's probably watching. She watches these sometimes.
I love Miss Foster. Let me just say that right now. I met Miss Foster. I walked in the room and there were people, little bitty people, and then it was old people, and all of them had Miss Foster. She must have been there 40 years. I don't know. But she had people, grown people crying, talking about when they were in her class. And I think she teaches what, third?
She taught, I don't know if I think she's still there, or she was before all this, kindergarten.
Oh my.
Kindergarten. She's both of my children's first teacher. But wonderful. She's the reason why I always say, as much as we want to see more Black teachers and more Black people in space, especially like in Oregon and Washington, Southwest Washington, where there's no diversity really, they're trying to get Black teachers. But what I tell people all the time is, if you have a teacher who sees the true potentiality in a kid and believes in their capacity,
that's right.
It will make a difference.
With
Absolutely.
Because
Miss Foster. I want to talk about Miss Foster. Miss Foster. What happened was, I think I went to the class and read to the class one day, or it was Kwanzaa or something I did. And I remember Miss Foster, she's always kind, always loving. And even when she's correcting students, it's just done in such an amazing way, right? But the one thing that impressed me the most is she does a video of her getting ready for school. To come back to school. She puts her clothes out. she takes you, it's a whole video of her getting ready for school. And I have to say, after it was all over, all the kids, I wanted the video. I wanted to It was so personal. She lets each one of her students know, I'm getting prepared to come back to be your teacher. And then at the end of the year, I don't know how she does it. There's a DVD on every child capturing all of these amazing things that they did. I said, that's a good teacher.
Yep.
That's a great teacher. That's a great teacher.
And I kept going, I don't know whoever y'all got in the building, but y'all need to be looking at Miss Foster.
But Miss Foster also she's a white teacher, came to Black Family Night. When we established Black Family Night, she showed up. Now, people were complaining, teachers were complaining, saying it was segregatory or segregating people. And really, I said, if you teach a Black child, if you have a Black child, you may not be a Black person. You might have a Black child at your house. And if you're teaching a Black child, you should be in here listening to what families' experiences have been in the school, so you can better understand how to connect with them and become partners in their child's education.
Absolutely.
People who were complaining weren't showing up. Miss Foster came, she had a notebook every time. She was taking notes.
I was there
on Wellness Wednesdays. I've seen her pop up, Miss Foster, just watching. So, I mean, again, she's always learning. And that's the thing, is I think that when teachers talk about being lifetime learners, they want the children to become lifetime learners, they have to become lifetime learners. you know, especially learning your kids. Yeah.
And when you're excited, I think, you know, and that's, and honest to God, you know, having been in all of your schools, actually, really, I've been in all of your schools and was just so, it was such a loving space. That's what touched me about the schools was, you know, I know what it felt like when I had the answer, you know, in the classroom. I had the answer, I did all my homework, and the teacher never called on me. Never saw my hand. Always saw the same 2 or 3 children and they didn't look like me. But somehow here I gone home, I did my homework, I got it all right, and I wanted to be able to show that I'd learned it, and it broke my heart. It broke my heart. And I remember, you know, and now, you know, I've walked through the schools and I've listened to the students and they want to tell you about something. And every single time Tracy would stop and go, okay, so what happened then? And then what happened then? And Carmen would go, and how did that do? And how did that work out? And I'm looking, you know, we're in the hall and they're just talking to them about all kind of stuff. And who does it? Who gets a principal or a teacher to hear about why your balloon busted over the weekend? You know, it's just a sense of connection. And of course, you all know I wrote the relationship model and the relationship approach because I know how important relationships are to our children. And I know how important relationships are to our families and to our communities. And so if we can bring that back to this, even though we're doing this, you know, this is intimate.
Yes, it is.
This is intimate. And, you know, so there's no reason, but I've actually been on Zooms where I'm going, not only are you the person on they so as far back as they can be, they're trying to be as disconnected as they can. And I'm like, go home and shut the thing off. Why are we doing this with you? Right? It's almost as though they go into a mode of disconnect. And this is intimate. I can see your zits. You know what I mean? What are you doing? Right? So I'm on these Zooms and this is how different they are, right? They're so different. I'm like, oh my, I'm going like, ooh, look at the time. I gotta get out because y'all are driving me crazy, right? Because it's so cold and so intellectual and so narrow. And I'm like, Lord, I'm waiting for the time to tick away and going, you know, somebody come call me.
I started doing inappropriate things. I'm on these, listen, let me tell you something. I'm so sick of Zoom. Now I did invest in Zoom in April and it's doing me wrong. In April, I saw this coming. So I'm doing okay with Zoom right now. But as far as being on these Zooms on a regular basis, and let me just say, being a nonprofit director, you got to tap dance for your money here and there. And you know, only a certain amount of shuffling I can handle. Okay, I can't handle it. So when I get in these spaces, especially when everybody's looking at me like, tell us how we've saved the lives of all your kids. And I'm like, I'm just trying to fix some of the mess you done created. That's what I want to say. But I think that when people get to join in with these Wellness Wednesdays, and thank you everybody, I know we're nearing the end, but the reason why people started this was so that our community could feel connection and could be in a space where they don't have to necessarily talk about what's happening to them, but they can process with us what they're experiencing. We can bring laughter and levity and resources and insight in a way that's not telling people what to do or shaming them for not doing it right. Or this is just a place for us to explore these things. And so when we have folks like you, and nobody's been paid, we don't get paid, we don't pay nobody to come on. So
we don't get paid. Nobody gets paid.
So the fact that people take the time to do this because we love our community and because we are coming from a very strengths-based approach, we know that there is beauty and intelligence and brilliance in our community. We don't have to keep talking about what we don't have. We know what we got.
Yes.
So if we take what we have and we continue to use what we have and to infiltrate these systems that are built to oppress us, not because we can't do it and we're underachieving, we're subgroups and we're all these negative under everything. When we start to talk about, and all this we do when we bring folks like you on, is we're like, look what we have. This is what we have. We got this.
We got this.
This too, right here. When we figure it out.
She's still trying to do the school.
But serious. Really, as old as I am, I swear, if I could find a space to teach with people who are sane, I would do it.
But the sane and whole, Because that's the other thing. If you're I run a Black organization, and one thing that I am so excited about is that we are in the business of building each other up and building our community up. So it's not like, well, I'm the director, so I can't, take out the trash.
Right.
We don't have these. We're whole. We're community, and I think that that's the thing, is that you got to pick your folks wisely so that you can model healthy ways to interact, healthy ways to grow and to be successful without, knocking everybody else down. Because that's what starts to happen. Well, I'm going to be the vice
You're
principal.
gonna be a millionaire. We all know that.
Huh? Carmen? Did you say Carmen?
Carmen's gonna be.
Oh, we know this. We know this. We know.
No.
Should have been a millionaire already. So with your millionaire brain and my hustleitis, we can make it happen. I'm addicted.
Yes.
We will figure it out. We will figure it out.
Okay, well, we know if it gets deep. If it gets deep and we need to do the school, we can pull it off.
Yes.
We can, right?
Yes.
We know there's just a few other people that's not on here that we know can run small countries.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We will bring them all on and we will make it happen. So if it gets deep, I'm calling y'all.
Listen, we know that. Look, you're talking about IMD. We know that. We know IMD get it done.
That's
IMDb, right? Okay, so thank you, everyone. Anyone have any parting words of encouragement for our parents and teachers out there? That'd be a great way to end.
Yeah, I would just say that, I hope that they can experience a school leader like Carmen or a school leader like Tracy, who, wants to ensure that they're safe, known, and loved. You know what I mean? And that's because that's really what it's about. And then we can talk about all the technical aspects of school, right? But there's some aspects of school that have nothing to do with the technical that I think that get at what you were talking about, the beauty of school and these loving spaces that really, really humanize not only the kids, but they humanize everybody. The more you humanize kids, the more you humanize yourself, right? And I think it's just super important to do the work that way. And I just hope that and trusted parents have an opportunity to experience principals like we have right here on this call who are doing the work the way it's supposed to be done. And that's what I'll say. And then, obviously, I hope that they'll advocate for themselves when it's not being done, right? Yeah.
And I think that's critical. All of that, and additional to that, to not get stuck in what we do to kids, right? As the principal, as the teacher, what we do to them. For me, it was most transformational when the whole building included the folks in the cafeteria, the campus security, the nurse, when the ladies in the attendance office, when every adult and child had community. It was about humanization of everyone and not stripping anyone of their dignity in terms of how you related, how you spoke to them, how you greeted them, how you interacted with them. And so I saw that transformation happen in an environment that was very interesting, but the impact was on everyone in that building because that was our community. Adult, student, and parent who came into that building, we had to transform how we related to one another. So not what we do to people, it's what we do together, because we're building this plane as it's in flight, and we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Well, I agree with both of you. I'd just like to add, and I think I can speak on behalf of my colleagues, that we are here to serve and we are here to meet parents where they are. And that definitely presents a range, but wherever they are, whether you have an email or not, we will get that for you. Yeah, we will do whatever we need to do to make it happen. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, you can see why, my life is so rich because I have such amazing and wonderful people in it. And so grateful. I want to thank you all for your service, because it's sometimes a thankless job. Nobody really speaks about that person that made the biggest difference. And For a lot of children, it's Miss Foster, and it'll be, you know, Miss Carmen and Miss Tracy and Mr. Anthony and Miss B. It'll be those folks that in the end, folks will look back and go, that made that difference. And, you know, all I say is create a memory. Each one of us has an opportunity to create memories. And I just say create positive memories. You know, I literally did that with my grandchildren. I did things with them where I knew this was going to be a memory.
Yeah.
And we can create wonderful memories of school and of learning. Thank you all so very, very much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.